Welcome to the NHL 94 podcast, part of the CBP Media Network. This podcast is dedicated to the greatest game ever developed, where I will talk about the development of the game, tournaments and matches, our stories about NHL 94, the people that make up the NHL 94 community, the games won, lost, and the chirps that need to be heard around the world. Welcome back, 16-bit hockey fans, to yet another edition of the NHL 94 podcast. And today we have, I'm very grateful to have one Danny O'Dwyer, because he is one of the gentlemen behind Noclip Documentaries. And I want to talk about this. I want to talk about his involvement of this. Noclip, they are making video game documentaries for people like us, because this is crowdfunded. They're using stuff like Patreon. There's no sponsorship. So this is a very interesting endeavor how they're going about doing this. But I don't want to talk too much about it. I want Danny to talk more about it. Danny, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on. As you may have seen if you watched our NHL 94 documentary, I am clearly not very good at hockey, if you watched the intro. So to be on this podcast, I'll try my very best, because I think I'm better at NHL 94 than I am at hockey. I don't think I could be any worse anyway, for sure.
Well, at the very least, I'll do my best to pass you the puck, and you just tip it in, and you'll be able to score goals. We'll do
one-timers every time.
Exactly.
I could probably do it on, when they pulled a goalie in the last, say 40 seconds. I could probably maybe do it then. I feel like the Irish sport of hurling is not that far removed from hockey. The problem is the ice. That's the issue for me. Hitting something with a stick, not a problem. Ice, I'm like Bambi, not good.
I'm with you. You know what? I'm a Canuck, and I can't even skate. You put me on skates, I'm probably just as good or bad as you are. So we're in the same boat, man.
I can rollerblade. I skateboarded, BMX, and rollerbladed for about 10 years. I can do rollerblades okay, but yeah, that's maybe street hockey is what I need to do. I need to move to one of those, summer hockey towns where it's warm at the moment where you are, right? It's not winter.
It is
anymore.
very nice. Yeah.
Did the kids go out and play street hockey? That's the thing.
When they can, yeah. The gentleman next door does that. The little guy next door does that. So yeah,
nice.
It's still a thing over here.
Nice. Did you just call a child a gentleman? Does he wear like a tie? Is he like a particularly sort of fancy lad?
He's refined.
These kids these days are so much more refined than we are. You say this, I'm watching I'm wearing a floral shirt today. Only because my daughter, I wear black shirts every day, and my daughter was graduating kindergarten today, and she was like, Dad, I want you to dress in your wedding clothes. And then I was like, well, that's not going to happen. She was like, can I just pick a shirt out for you? And she picked this one. So I decided to wear it for the interview as well.
Oh, congratulations to the young lady, or young
O'Dwyer.
Young O'Dwyer. That's awesome. Good for her. She's going to be graduating to grade 1. So this is really good stuff.
Exciting times.
I want to talk about Noclip. I want to just I want to learn a little bit more about this.
Sure.
First off, what is a team? How big is this team? Because I couldn't find this information.
Yeah, we're not big. There's basically 2 of us full-time and then 2 more part-time. So we started almost 8 years ago. I used to work for a video game website called GameSpot.com. I was sort of their lead host for a few years here in America. I'm from Ireland originally. I worked at their studio in London. My dream was to work for the San Francisco office. And about 10 years ago, I moved over and did all that. And it was an absolute dream come true. And then after a while, I'd spent so much time talking to developers as part of that job. We didn't have as much exposure to talking to game developers in London. We had a little bit of it, but here in San Francisco, suddenly, because it was GameSpot and because the other big video game website, IGN, was literally 2 blocks down the road, developers would send their developers to us. So suddenly I had access to all these devs. And after a couple of years of it, I was like, oh, I know nothing about games development. I talk about this for a living, and thousands of people listen to me and my expertise, and I know nothing. So it really had this effect on me. And after a couple of years of doing it, I realized that, we'd done a bunch of interviews with developers, and I was like, this stuff's great. They're super smart. You just have to edit the stuff in a meaningful way and give it a bit of time and a bit of space to breathe. And also I could travel. I could do this. I could hop on a plane with one of my friends and we could go do this around the world. So that's what we did. My friend Jeremy, who had worked at GameSpot for years, he had quit a couple of, maybe a year or 6 months earlier, and he was doing freelance video production. And we had coffee one day, and I was like, you know, those videos we do, I think I want to do that full time, and we can try Patreon, because at that stage, a bunch of guys from IGN had left and started a company called Kind of Funny, and that was sort of the first through the wall for video game Patreons, right? This is almost 8 years ago. And I was like, well, if we got like this much, then we could do it. And we ended up getting 4 times as many as I thought we would on the first week. So that was that. And I've been doing it now for 8 years. But it's myself and Jeremy Jane, that same guy from day one. And then now we hire we have a full-time person who records gameplay for us. Sorry, part-time, but that's what he does pretty much all the time. And we have a podcast producer, but that's it. We're a small little team. We keep the costs low and we keep the work entertaining. We try
lean and mean. I like that.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
From what I gather, the next videos, I mean, the videos that you have that are guests that are going to be coming up, these are all suggestions by the fans. I mean, I think it's secrettape.video is how these videos or ideas come about first off. Do I have it right?
No, this is actually a different thing. So so lots of our the series that the NHL doc was in is in a sort of a mini series on Noclip called Greatest Hits, and those ones are all voted on by our patrons. So we literally we don't even stick a poll up. We actually just do open invites. They can pitch whatever they want, and then people can like upvote and downvote the comments, and then eventually we do a poll where when it's like, oh, it's clearly these 5 are the ones people like. The first one that won was Roller Coaster Tycoon. We had one on Thief back in the day. We've had a couple that have won that we haven't been able to stick the landing on. Like Unreal Tournament won a bunch of times. We're actually working on that now, finally. But it just sometimes you're like, oh, no one wants to talk to us about it. We can't do it. And NHL was in the mix for a long time, and sports games don't. Like, that's the thing. Like, a lot of our stuff tends to be first-person shooters and PC games mostly, right? Genesis, Mega Drive era sports games don't really get a look in, but NHL 94 is not like every other sports game. It's like it has a different flavor to it. So it was really cool to see it break through. Secret Tape is like that's our white label like video production company. That's like a whole different thing. We've done documentaries for, we did a documentary on the 25th anniversary of Half-Life for Valve. They paid us to make it, and that's on their YouTube channel. So that's a separate business, and we do some stuff, but it's disconnected from the Patreon stuff.
So you mentioned something I was going to ask you later on, but I think it's a good time to ask. Is it Genesis or a Mega Drive in your opinion?
Oh, man. Well, it was Mega Drive for me because I grew up in Ireland. So, and we're good Catholic boys, but we weren't naming our video game consoles after, religious texts. It seems a bit presumptive, if you ask me, for the people in Sega to start, I'm not going to name a console, from the Quran or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's a bit out there. Genesis, I don't know. I think Mega Drive's cooler, But look, if I grew up here and I was calling it the Genesis, maybe the Mega Drive would sound a bit like too cool for school or something. Like, what do you hear when you hear Mega Drive? Does it sound lame or does it sound cool?
No, it's just it's a European guy or gal that plays Genesis.
Right.
Me.
Okay.
So it's no different to me. I mean, it's like Famicom or NES or Super Famicom and Super NES.
Yeah.
Or SNES or SNES.
SNES. Yeah, we all went by SNES, NES and SNES in Europe or whatever. And in fairness, like, we have weird consoles. Like, I grew up playing the Amiga. You know what I mean? Like,
no Specky for you?
No, I was born in 86. I'm not as old as people think. I just went gray like when I was 19.
But the Spectrum was still around at that time. Like, even in the early 90s, it was still around, right?
I guess. But even the Amiga by that stage, like, but by the time I'm 10, it's 96. You know what I mean? But I think we got a console computer for the first time when I was 8 or 7 or something. Ireland was a very poor country in the 80s. So we were sort of, nobody was buying game consoles until like 94, 93. We'd sort of like crawled our way out, and the Celtic Tiger, as they call it, was starting. The first one I had was the Commodore Amiga, which is basically the Commodore girlfriend, which, that might be the most telling thing about who was buying computer games in the early 90s, that they named one the girlfriend.
The Amiga rocked, though. I don't.
Yeah, the Amiga's great.
The name. It was
No, my whole shelf here is just Amiga games the whole way along. I absolutely adore it. It's great. It's got my next one was the Mega Drive. But my love of games started with other sports games like Sensible Soccer and stuff over on
right.
the Amiga.
So, are you more of a PC guy or a console dude?
I play everything, honest to God. Like I have to, and I like to. I sit at a PC a lot of the day because I edit a lot of the day, and I mean, we all work in front of PCs predominantly, right? So when it comes to PC, I spend a lot of time playing like indie Steam games and stuff like that. But I want to get off the PC a lot to play games, so I have my TV behind me here. We've a TV upstairs as well, and I jump on that thing. I get a lot of work out of my Steam Deck as well, which I guess is a PC, but doesn't feel like it. Feels like it's sort of taking the space of the Switch or something. Switch is probably the one I play the least because there's only ever like always feels like there's only ever like 4 games on a Switch I want to play, and then the rest I can play on a PC.
Name the 4 games. I'm curious if there's
some. Like it has to be like Breath of the Wild. Like it's all the Nintendo first party stuff predominantly, yes. Right? It's like Mario, Breath of the Wild. What else is a big hitter on Switch? I played a lot.
Tears of the Kingdom. I guess it's.
I did. I tried. I got the OLED one, and I got Tears of the Kingdom when I was on a trip. I was in Maryland, and I was dying to play it, and I played it nonstop for about 3 or 4 days. Kind of at nighttime in the hotel and in the plane and all that, and I never touched it again. There was for some reason it did not get its hooks in like Breath of the Wild did. I don't know what it was.
I'm with you on that, and I think a lot of people share that same sentiment because Breath of the Wild, when it came out, it was a system seller.
Yeah,
we had nothing like that on a Nintendo console before. Tears of the Kingdom, though, it was a direct descendant of. It's the only Zelda game that was a. Right. There's a sequel.
Yeah, you're right. They often go in the complete opposite direction. You've got your Ocarina Majora's Mask situation. You've got everything that happened on the GameCube and the Wii. They often change a lot because of the hardware and because they take a lot of time between Zeldas, and they did with these kind of as well. Like was it 4 or 5 years between the two of them?
Between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it was 7, I think.
Was it that many? Wow. So but obviously we're just in a different landscape. Games don't change as fast as they used to. The NHL is a good example of that, I think, as well.
NHL's. I want to talk about NHL some more before we go back to other consoles. So, I mean, the making of NHL 94, that was a 30th anniversary documentary. I want to hear your thoughts about making that, because I would assume you might have touched on NHL 94, maybe a little bit dabbled in it, but doing a documentary, you went neck deep at that. I would imagine you were playing, you were talking to people involved. It's like, what are your thoughts on the game itself, the community, and just the whole thing as a whole?
I 100% in my bones understand why and aren't surprised by the fact that there are still people who play NHL 94 tournaments every year, who have a podcast about NHL 94, who are on Discords about NHL 94. I get it. I 100% get it, because it is a special game. And my exposure to it was, and I mentioned it in the doc, I think, was a double pack that was sold in Europe, which I think is very funny, where they couldn't get people to buy full price Madden or NHL games, so they just put them on the same disc. It was called EA Sports Double Header, I believe, and it had EA Hockey and Madden. I want to say 92, was it? I forget which one it was. They just called it John Madden Football over there, right? Mm-hmm. And I'd never. There are some American sports that are shown in Ireland. Like, you'll see the Super Bowl, right? Or certain football games are on the weekend. Maybe it's an East Coast game that's played early, and you might see it and stuff. We hardly ever see, we see golf a lot. If it's over there, golf's obviously very big in Ireland as well. Hockey never makes the cut. We never see ice hockey on television in Ireland, because it's, I feel like, predominantly played in the evening. There are midweek games. There are, and for whatever reason, that never gets shown. Baseball is kind of similar. You don't really see it. So the only time I'd ever seen hockey was playing this game. And I was like, this is fucking mental. They're skating around. They're smashing into each other. And there's an Irish sport called hurling that we all play as young people. My dad played it for our county. Like, we're a big hurling sort of county, and where I'm from, my dad was involved in a local GAA, Gaelic Games Association, a club. He was a chairman there for a while. So like, we grew up around all that stuff, and there, for very good reasons, have never been many hurling games. They took a swing at it back in the PlayStation 2 era, but it wasn't amazing. So this was like a little bit of, it was like an alien version of hurling. It was like, I get the idea of moving a small ball around, trying to get space, trying to find space, trying to put the ball into space so somebody can run onto it. The only difference is that the goals on hurling are the size of soccer goals, maybe even slightly taller. And obviously hockey is not that case. So it's like a faster, cooler version of hurling, because hurling's 15 people. It's the fastest field sport in the world. Whereas obviously hockey's only, it's a handful of folks. Is it 5 and a goalie? I was about to say 5, but is it 6?
You're 100% right. It's 5 and a goalie.
Okay.
Until somebody goes in the penalty box, then we reduce it by 1.
And then who knows? Well, how many? You can only go into 3v3, right? You can't. Have
it can, yeah. So it could be 5 versus 3, 4 versus 3, 3 versus 3, and that's
what happens if someone gets sin binned after and they're the third?
They're just added, so whenever they just add time to the penalty minutes. And,
okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. So
although you really
maximum you could go down as 2 guys,
which makes sense. It would be just a massacre. Although it would just be over sooner, wouldn't it? Because then the player would come back on. Anyway, sorry. I'm learning about hockey rules that I don't know about. So that's that's how I got into it, and I had played 94 then afterwards, and I played 93 because I remember all the fight stuff as well. And then 94 was the one that kept getting re-put out on stuff. So whenever a new, there was I think there was maybe an Xbox 360 version of it. There's certainly one on the PlayStation that I play now. I have it, that's loaded on all my machines, because whenever I want to, there'll be some time, like once every 2 months, where I want to play a couple of games of NHL 94. But 94 was always the one that ended up going on stuff. So that's the one that subsequently I've ended up playing a lot more of. But it was funny to see, like, in one way I'm not surprised that there's so many NHL 94 fans out there and that there is this stuff, but it was also like very heartwarming to see it to watch. Like, I watched that documentary that the big super fans made years ago, right, where they went around and covered the esports side of it and interviewed Mark Lesser and did all that sort of stuff as well. They interviewed him in person. I think that guy spent years working on that documentary. So we knew that, like, okay, we're not going to make like the quintessential NHL 94 documentary. Like, it would be cool to do it, but we never did any remote interviews until COVID happened. And then we had to for like 2.5 years. And now we are sort of in a hybrid thing where we do some in person, some not. For this one, the availability of everyone was so small that we had to just jump on them. We couldn't like plan, can we come out to you? And everyone was really busy, and it was through EA, so we were like, okay, we'll just do it remote. We knew we couldn't make like the quintessential NHL 94 doc, and that ultimately someone else had already sort of done that. So what we wanted to do was kind of the difference thing that we do is that we focus on process, we focus on development. We try and talk about the specific challenges that this game development had. We're talking a little bit about the legacy of it, but mostly we're talking to the people about what it was like making the game back then, and the lessons, the challenges they ran into, the way they got over them, and the specific game design lessons that existed then, because a lot of our audience are people in game dev as well. And some of this stuff applies, 30 years later, it might be a completely different situation, in terms of code base, in terms of, employment, in terms of the genre, everything. But there are always commonalities and lessons that do, transfer over.
That's awesome that you basically had a small window to do it and you executed it, and what came out was a phenomenal product. And thank you for doing it on behalf of us NHL 94 fans. I'm curious though, in terms of the feedback, was it in line with what you were expecting, or did it exceed expectations? Or, I mean, I'm curious, like, coming out of it, releasing it, and getting feedback from the community, like, how did it all jive with you?
Yeah, I think the thing that happens that we like is when people just don't even talk about us, they just talk about the game. Like that it almost feels like the way in which we produce our documentaries, we're trying very hard to not get in the way of the conversation between the people who made the game and the fans. I'm there, to do the intro and to do the bit of voiceover and storytelling, but it's not about me. It's not about my love of this game. Like I'll put a bit of that in there just to humanize it a little bit, to be a proxy maybe. But we set up Noclip. Like I had a decent following when I left GameStop. Oh my god. I used to work at I've done it. I used to work at GameStop back in the day, and I would say GameSpot. And when I worked at GameSpot, everyone there accidentally said GameStop all the fucking time. And now I do as well. So apologies. When I worked at GameSpot, I left and I had a decent following online, but the whole point of this whole thing of calling it Noclip, of being this separate entity, was because I wanted it to be like the 30 for 30 of games, or I wanted it to be the planet Earth of games. Of games development docs. I wanted it to get out of the way of it, and Richard Attenborough's there, but really he's there just to get you in the field with that leopard, or to get you in the bush with that sloth, or whatever it is, right? And we're in a similar position. So whenever I read the comments, the thing that I always want to see is just people reminiscing and talking about their experience with the game, and maybe referencing something they saw on the doc and being like, oh, that makes me think about this thing, or makes me, think about things differently a little bit. And we saw loads of that, we got lots of emails from people. That happens a bit, where people watch it and then they want to reach out and say thanks and stuff. But we have the easiest job in the world. All we have to do, like, it's kind of hard to mess these up. We've been doing them for so long. It's hard to really make them really, really, really good. Like I always feel every project we do, we could have done a better job, and we just try and put that energy into the next one. But that's what I was really enjoyed, was just like how people were very sweet about Michael Brook and Mark Lesser, and got an insight into like how different game design was back then. I feel like that's an important thing that we have always tried to do at Noclip, is to try and show the human side. We're not trying to whitewash corporations. You know what I mean? We're not here to do PR for megacorps. EA does not need us to do their press for them or whatever. But while I believe that that's the case, and people should be hold corporations accountable and whatnot, those studios, even and today, still are still full of people who have who care about their kids and have mortgages and care about the games they work on, even if they don't maybe reach the watermark that people want, or maybe they exceed them. They're just people trying their best most of the time. In games, they're usually trying really, really hard, because the hours can be really intense. So it was just very nice to see people celebrate the game. That was the whole point. The whole point of this stuff was this is an excuse for us to just celebrate the game, to talk to these lads and give them a shout out. And it was I definitely saw that in the comments.
Well, sure. I want to say thank you for doing it. I mean, on a personal level, I could say for me, when I watch this, even play NHL 94 or dabble in the community, it's very extremely nostalgic for me. When I play it, it brings me back to a time when I had much less, I didn't have bills to pay. Right, it was just, I was a kid or a young teenager. So
simpler time.
It's a much simpler time, right? So like I could do that, and it's like brings me back to that, and I could be a kid again for a brief period of time, and everything with the world, which is very crazy that's going on around us. To me, it just wipes all that out, and I could just focus on the stuff that's just pure and fun once again. And what you guys did helped rekindle the spirit of NHL 94 for me, at least. So
that's funny, because I think there are some docs we do where that is also the case for me. This was kind of that. It was a little bit different because now I live in America, so my childhood version of hockey is a very North American thing, right? Mm-hmm. So that version, I still remember it a bit, like playing that game. And I have lots of memories of playing that game, but for some reason, like it kind of half got me there. We recently did a documentary about the music of Wipeout 2097. It was called Wipeout XL over here. It was like a sort of more adult version of Mario Kart, I guess is the best way of putting it, like futuristic or whatever. But that is literally just about the soundtrack, and that whole documentary when I was making it was pure nostalgia porn. It was just like, this is, every time I look at any gameplay of this, I am immediately, it's 25 years ago. So Yeah, we definitely try and do that as much as we can, and a large part of that is getting out of the way of the story. It's just is like talking about the game, showing it off. And with NHL 94, it's like so easy because like that game is so, everything about it, the sound, the definitely the graphics, like the pixel graphics of NHL 94 are just unbeatable. Like they're perfect. That like you have a framed picture behind you there. They
Yes.
just always, like we used one of the guys or a couple of the guys on the thumbnail for the video. Even the box art for it is just awesome. It's just a photograph of guys playing hockey. Like, you know, it's mostly white. Like the negative space is really smartly used. Yeah, I love the. There's just so much about that game. The sound of it, the look of it, the gameplay, the music that gets played, all that stuff. Just it's very, what's the word? Evocative, maybe. So again, we just tried to get out of the way of the game as much as possible. You know.
You touched upon Mario Kart Wipeout. What's the GOAT version of Mario Kart in your opinion?
The best one. Look, Mario Kart problem is the Mario Kart problem is like a thing we bring up a lot over here at Noclip when we're talking about the projects that we work on, because your favorite Mario Kart is your first Mario Kart. Like almost, I would say, unless you your first Mario Kart was like a real stinker. Like, I don't know, was there a Game Boy Advance one or something? I'm not quite sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a bad one. That might be a problem. So I think my favorite is Double Dash. That was my first one I played on first one I owned on a GameCube. I didn't own a Nintendo console growing up. I was pure Mega Drive. I went to my friend's house and played Mario Kart on a Super NES, but it was like I wasn't very good at it. But Double Dash was the one I got into. What about you?
The original one on SNES or SNES or whatever you want to call it, just because that's the one that I first played. We played the shit out of that game when growing up. Such a good game. I wish it had the ability to play with more than just 2 players.
Right. Is there no 4? Yeah, you're right. There's no 4-player. Yeah.
No, it's just 1v1. So I guess technical capabilities was preventing that. But either way, like we had so much fun playing it growing up. And
no multi-tap for that. Remember the multi-tap? I used to play like 4-player Bomberman. I guess 8-player Bomberman. I think you could do on the Mega Drive. Get that multi-tap.
Really?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you could do 8. Could you do 8? I think you could do 8. Somebody listening knows more than me, but so there was a version of Bomberman you can do with like stupid amount of people, like 16 or something. It was like the N64 version or something. I don't know.
Crazy. Since you're a Mega Drive guy, what's better than Revenge of Shinobi or Sonic?
Oh man, I mean, I really, really like Shinobi. I never completed it. It's so hard.
There's 2 endings, by the way, in Revenge of Shinobi.
I haven't found one of them. I'm certainly not going to find the second one. I think it has to be Sonic. Like if you said like Shinobi and Streets of Rage, I might have a bit more trouble. But I think no, for me it's Sonic. I think, even though Sonic's kind of a game, it's like I was about to say a bad game. There are some games that only worked then, you know. And we just did our Wipeout documentary, and at the end of that doc, we talk kind of about how that game was so good back then, and people have been trying the new Wipeouts to be as good as the old Wipeouts, and they never will be. And it's not because the people who made them later aren't making good games. It's because the time and place in the UK during that height of dance music, during, you know, these were the first ever 3D games on the PlayStation. Like, this was a very particular time and place, and that's why that game hit so hard. Sonic is very similar. Sonic actually comes up in that documentary as well, because Sonic is similar in that, like, nobody wants to play a game where you can run that fast where the screen is that small. But back then, didn't matter, because it was like, oh my god, blast processing, it looks incredible. NHL 94 is the opposite of those games. NHL 94 plays as good today as it did back then. Like, there is nothing you know what I mean? There's nothing about it. It's not slow. It doesn't feel slow. The graphics don't feel old. You know, they look old, but they don't feel crap now. They have a timeless quality to them. Mm-hmm. The AI is, you know, you can figure it out if you've played enough of it, but it's still really good and playable, and it's a great 2-player experience. Like, sure, maybe you could give it a splash of paint or something, or make it load faster on a port, but in terms of its gameplay, it still works, and there are not many games where that's the case.
Then what's your favorite 2-player game, 1v1 game out there? Is it going to be a Street Fighter? It sounds like this is going to be something that something you like, these 1v1 type games, but I want to hear your opinion. What is the definitive best game out there that's 1v1?
I'm looking at my little shelf over here. I'm going to pull one off. Probably it's like the Mario Kart problem. It's like the first one I ever played. It's one of the sensible soccers for sure. Sensible.
Uh-huh.
It's a sensible world of soccer. I see they blurred on the. I'm holding the box up to a camera here. They blurred a lot of the players' faces because they did not own the rights to them.
Right.
This was the game me and my brother played on the Amiga forever, and we have like 8 different versions of it. That, or maybe there's another game that's staring at me over there. Actually, this might be the one. Worms. Do you ever play much Worms?
Worms is awesome.
Worms is such a great 1v1 game because it's turn-based. You can play it with lots more different people because the skill sort of requirement, the immediate stick skill isn't as much as like a game like Sensible Soccer. Like this, if you're not playing this game a lot, you're not going to be very good at it. I like it because I played it against my brother. With Worms, I played that against my cousins. Me and my wife during COVID got way into Worms. Is it WMD? I think was the name of that port. I forget, but I think it is that one. We got loads into that. That and Age of Empires 2. Those were our 2 games we played against each other a lot. But one of them you can do in front of the television. One of them you need to have 2 PCs in the same room. So we did it a little bit less. Civilization didn't make the cut for you? I'm not a huge Civ person. I don't know why. She is. I'm not. I prefer the. It's maybe it's similar to NHL 94. I prefer cute little pixel people. I like seeing a little farmer going out there picking the berries in the same way I like to see a little Jeremy Roenick smacking a one-timer. I just love that pixel graphics. It looks good. So yeah, that new HD remake they made of Age of Empires. That was actually another one we did on that series of Greatest Hits. We did the one on Age of Empires 2. Similar to 94 in that it's like part of a series, but there's something about this one in particular that people still love for whatever reason. Do you have a Diablo on the drawing room board? That's something that you'll be doing on that game series? Or we are actually looking into Diablo at the moment because what was it? I'm not doing it. I did not play much Diablo growing up. I played a bunch of I played Warcraft and Starcraft on the Blizzard side. I played WoW obviously later on, a lot of it. Yeah. But Diablo was not one that I played a lot of. But Jeremy, my cohort on over on Noclip, is a huge fan of Diablo, and he wants to do something on. I think it's on 2. So he's actually reaching out to people at the moment, trying to do that one. Yeah, 2 is much more refined than the first one. And the first one I played a lot. Right. Yeah, I played a ton. But that Worms. I mean, go back to another topic. I'll never forget how I first was exposed to that. It was in computer science class. Oh my god! Game over. It was just, what the heck is this? And we started playing it. It was like you said, it was game over at that point. And multiple people could join in. What a great concept that was. That first game was made by like one person. He doesn't do interviews very often. So hopefully, I'd love to get him someday. But I think he was like super young. I think he was like 18 or 17 when he sold it to Team 17. When he got the publishing deal with them. And they've basically I feel like Team 17's entire backbone of their money for the past 25 years has been Worms, just making new Worms games because it's perfect. It's like chess. It's like, don't mess with it. You know what I mean? You've made the perfect game. Add in some new weapons or whatever, sure, but like it just works. It's like and it wasn't the first game that did that. There was all those tank games, you're shooting mortars at each other or whatever, back in the arcade back in the like Spectrum and Amstrad days, but yeah. But this one had a little cute worm that said kamikaze. You put the thing around his head. So right? You remember that? Good point. I think they took that out. I think that's not in any of those games anymore. I'll have to look it up. I think it's in. I don't think it's in those ones anymore. Which I can, I guess. But it's not like, is it? I don't know. I'm not know where you're going. Whether or not it's a racial stereotype or not. There were kamikaze pilots. I just watched Godzilla -1, which has a great little part about the ethics and also the reality of a lot of those kamikaze pilots, because a lot of them, there was all these like made up stories about them being welded into their planes, which is a complete misnomer. Apparently, it was part of Western propaganda, but a lot of them would come back because they had engine problems or something. But a lot of them would obviously come back multiple times because they did not want to do it. Yeah, just another weird. There's so much weird history in World War II. But for whatever reason, Worms, yeah, they. I don't think that's in any of the other ones. It
Yeah,
might have been in 2, but I don't think it came past that one. Yeah,
we got to
there
start
are
a writing campaign to get this back in the game.
exactly. Yeah, free Worms. No, I'm not. I'm not gonna go put my hammer myself onto a cross for that one. It wasn't.
It's not the hill you wanna-
It was also like the worst move because like there were plenty of ways for you to kill your own worm and kill another worm. You know, you could just stand beside them and do like a grenade or something. Because also when your worm died, it made an explosion.
Right.
So strategically, it made no sense to use the kamikaze because it shot you off screen usually anyway. And if you didn't hit them, it was hard. You had to aim it anyway.
Yeah. No, it was situational. Like in a way, you could probably knock them off into something, and like, I don't know. There must have been
was like 3 of them in a row. You know,
yeah,
you could like
maybe.
kind of do that. Maybe that was the play.
Yeah. So you damage a
knows?
few of them at the same time. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to have a match after this and figure it out. So I guess there's going to be no more sports games documentary is going to be done by Noclip, from what I gather.
Why would that be the case?
Oh, so there's possibility?
Because we did the best one. Is that it? We're gonna.
If I could give you some suggestions,
absolutely, yeah, we'd love to. The thing was we hadn't done one until NHL '94, which seemed crazy because I play sport. I watch like 20 sports. Like I'm a big gamer and a big nerd, and I was watching the Euros earlier today. Tomorrow night I'm going to go to our local speedway and watch the race car. I was at NASCAR last weekend. I'm sorry, golf is literally one of the only ones I don't watch. I used to caddy for my dad, and it's as much fun as it's like, well, a lot of sports tough to watch. Baseball's tough to watch, and yes, I'll have it on a second screen. I feel like I would get into golf if I just left it on the second screen, but it's just because I have so many other sports going on. But yeah, let me, what would be your name 5? What are 5 sports games do you think would be
I could give you 2 that like definitively come to mind. Okay. RBI baseball being one.
Oh, okay. Yes. Fair. Anyone in particular, like the original?
The original's fantastic. It's on both the arcade and the NES.
Okay.
And so there's still a very strong community surrounding it. The gameplay, if you look at it, the graphics, it's very much like NHL 94. It's timeless graphics. The gameplay is still fun. It's just very relevant today. And RBI baseball being one. The second, I would suggest maybe is Tecmo Bowl. And
okay, yes.
And again, another strong community around it, and may not be as polished as the other, like as NHL 94's RBI baseball. That could be blasphemous by me, but either way, it's still a fantastic game to play, and potentially worthy of some documentary on it. Those are the 2 that come to mind for me.
They're both very good games, and they also represent the sort of the zenith of a period of sports games design within those genres, because every game is different. Every game went through this sort of like maturation period where there was a bunch of people trying to be like, okay, how do we make a digital version of this sport? Mm-hmm. And they all tried weird stuff, and some of it we remember, and some of it's like really strange. Like there's a lot of early gridiron football games that are just bizarre looking. You're just like, this is the way, like, because they were made for a console or a machine. Often like these, like Mark talks about a lot of this stuff in the documentary. He talks about the handheld games that he was working on, right? And a lot of, sort of that was one avenue. That's because the console market didn't really come from one place, because it was kind of a lot of the Spectrum stuff, PC stuff, arcades, and then also these things. They all sort of converged a bit, but those games are really interesting because they had to be made for specific piece of hardware. Like we've got loads of these things lying around. Can you make a baseball that works on this?
Yes.
So you have to. So what I think like RBI and Tecmo Bowl kind of are is kind of we figured out the way we want to do these, and then somebody kind of did a really good first draft of one, and that was it. And those are those games, and then we sort of went from there, as it were.
And good sequels on both of those as well, with RBI 2, RBI 3, and Tecmo Super Bowl. So like there was great sequels. So there's lots of material that you could draw upon.
RBI, I think, is a Namco. It's a Japanese game. I think is where's Tecmo Bowl made actually? Was
That
that
I
in
don't know. I haven't played it as much as
was
RBI, so it's
Tecmo,
hard to.
wasn't it? So it's the company Tecmo, right? So presumably it was. Am I crazy
Could be
thinking
it.
that? Yeah, Tecmo published it. So Tecmo developed it. Yeah, I forgot Tecmo was another Japanese. But they also had a subsidiary in Torrance. That's bizarre. So LA, they also had a studio. I don't know where it was made. That's cool. So presumably both those are Japanese developed American sports games.
Uh,
Although no, calling baseball an American sport, I feel like is considering how much of it they play in Japan is maybe a bit of a stretch. That's a bit
or
more.
say Venezuela, Puerto Rico,
Oh, you're
or
right. Yeah, yeah. Not
Cuba.
so big in Europe. We've got
Yeah,
cricket. Who needs baseball when you've cricket?
I guess that's a game that eludes me. I don't know what the heck's going on, but
It's pretty cool. You can get
I'm
into
sure
it.
it is.
Yeah.
Just I don't know. It's when you have those 3-day tests or whatever they call them. It's like, geez, like
It's
let's
a
end it
lot.
quickly.
Yeah,
That's why. What do they do now in India? The 20.
it's the 2020 World Cup is actually on right now, where it's basically they limit the amount of innings, which is something that baseball just does, but they don't really do that in cricket. So yeah, that's the 2020 games are sort of like a compressed version of it. And then I think the IPL also does. I don't know if they do 2020, but they do shorter games as well. It's not like the Ashes where Australia and England play each other over the course of like what feels like 40 weeks to see who wins a tiny cup full of ashes, which is, I don't know.
Now I gotta
history. There's some good cricket games. Brian Lara Cricket on the Mega Drive. Great game. Great game.
I didn't even know they made a cricket game. I'm gonna try it out. I gotta download the ROM.
Do it. Brian, I swear to God, Brian Lara Cricket is the NHL 94 cricket games. Let me tell you, I'm not even joking. Like it's iconic in its own way. I think I have a copy of it lying upstairs. Actually, yeah, it's good stuff.
That's awesome. You did. I mean, now you. Well, Noclip did a video on one of the more recent Final Fantasies. I think 14
Right,
it was.
Yeah. Yes, online. Final Fantasy 14 online. We did that. Well, pre-COVID, obviously. I think it was our second year, so it'd be about 7 years ago now. This summer, we released it. So yeah, I think maybe we recorded it 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, that was fun. That was a real. NHL 94 is a good example of a documentary we can do where I know the game really well, so it's not that hard. Final Fantasy 14, on the other hand, was I'd never played a Final Fantasy game for more than 2 hours. I'm not a huge JRPG fan.
I was going to ask you if you played 4 or 6, which is here.
No,
those would be an awesome documentary. Those are iconic games.
And this is the problem. When we started Noclip, I was like, I hope other people do this stuff because we're never going to be able to cover everything. There's going to be blind spots for us. There's going to be stuff we're not that into. And some people kind of have over the years, but like a lot of people have come and gone doing it because it's really hard. And it's like you have to really love it. Like, and I love doing this stuff. And that's why, like, in a way, we did Final Fantasy 14 online because I was like, well, there's a huge story behind this. It got pitched to me at the first ever patron meetup we did. We were filming our first documentary ever, which was the only sort of quasi sports game we did before, which was Rocket League, which is basically soccer with cars. And we were in San Diego recording that, and one of our patrons pulled me aside and talked to me for about 15 minutes about Final Fantasy 14. And I was like, this is crazy. They like completely remade the game while it was still online and then launched it and then made it part of the story of the game, that they were destroying the old version of the world for a new one. It's like, I did not know any of this. Yeah, we went over, and I think the reason that documentary comes up a lot when people talk about Noclip is because we got Japanese studios I feel like Japan's coming up a lot, and I'm not a Japanese expert. I've been there one time and it was to record this thing. But sort of, I don't like painting any culture with a broad brush, but in general, as from a Western's perspective, it's harder to get access to Japanese studios as a Westerner, and they obviously don't open up as much as perhaps they would with their local media because there is a language barrier there's a cultural barrier, all that sort of stuff. But we spent a lot of time there. We talked to them for a long time. We were very like sort of open about what we wanted to do. And they were the reason people I think like that doc is because they were super open and honest about the whole thing. And like we even talked to the CEO of Square Enix about it. Like they gave us access that not a lot of people get. And yeah, it was cool to put it together. There's so many crazy stories out there. Sometimes the game, it doesn't matter if you are into it or not, the story is worth it just on its own. And I think a lot of people watch that documentary who probably never played Final Fantasy 14.
Gosh, I was kind of hoping that you would have mentioned, I love Final Fantasy 4, I love Final Fantasy 6, but maybe Phantasy Star. Is that because you had a Mega Drive?
Exactly, that's the thing. I was a Mega Drive. I was a Mega Drive boy. I didn't have my first Nintendo was a GameCube. So you want to talk to me about Beautiful Joe? You want to talk to me about Resident Evil 4? Sure. But yeah, no, I wasn't even a fantasy, a PSO or a Phantasy Star guy or anything.
Oh, because Phantasy Star, they have also Phantasy Star Online.
Yeah, PSO is huge. I mean that's a PlayStation 2 game. That's still around.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
It's a fan made, like, they keep it up. The fans do it. It's kind of
it must
like
be
Ultima
it must
Online
be like
in a way.
a server. Yeah, where it must be.
They got
server. I think Ultima might have official servers. I might be crazy. I think Ultima is still officially up. I think it's
really.
Yeah, I think so. I might be crazy. I'm pretty sure. I think so. Yeah.
Something needs to be done on the death of Lord
British.
Like that one time that he died in the game. Have you ever heard that
he was
story?
stabbed. Yeah, they what happened? There was a bug. There was a bug, and somebody went up and stabbed him.
They casted a spell, a fire spell.
That's what it was.
So he was there. He was just, I don't know, he was doing a flex in front of a whole bunch of people, and this guy realized, hey, you're not impervious to magics, and so he casted a fire spell and burned him to a crisp.
Amazing. Poor Richard Garriott was at home, just like dressed up as a king in front of his PC, going like, "What?" The respawn button pops up. Yeah, I've never interviewed him. I've wanted to for a while. We've talked on Twitter a few times. I'm freaked out by anyone who's been to space. I'm like, you're just I don't want to meet anyone who's been to space. They freak me out.
Oh no, man! There's so much you could talk about. Is the world really flat or round?
Exactly. Yeah.
One guy that can definitively say.
Should be the first guy, just as a straight face as ever. Just go like, so yeah, it's flat, right? You can tell.
Yeah. So curious though, favorite console, because you mentioned more than once, it seems, PlayStation over Xbox. So are you more of a PlayStation dude than an Xbox dude?
Oh, I don't know, because I feel like that first Xbox was a real whiff. Like, I think I was also angry because I was really looking forward to playing Halo on PC. Yeah. I remember reading a PC Gamer preview of Halo and then realizing afterwards what had happened. There was going to be an Xbox exclusive. I was a huge Xbox 360 owner, as I think a lot of people kind of were. So I think my biggest game collection, outside of PC, obviously, is probably on the 360. I was prime age for that. I was working in a GameStop, so I used to get loads of secondhand games, like staff discount on top of them. So I was just loading them up. But I don't know. 360 is probably up there with one of my favorite consoles because it was such a good time. There's so many great games. Online play had sort of reached into the bedroom at that stage, and I had lots of memories of playing great games like Halo 3 and Gears of War and Call of Duty Modern Warfare on the 360. From a nostalgic place, like, it's hard to get past the Amiga and the Mega Drive, but I don't know. Those first two PlayStations were absolutely fantastic. Like, it's helpful that the PlayStation 3 was such a weird piece of kit. Like, there was a couple of really fantastic games on PS3, but it was so expensive, and it really wasn't the powerhouse that 2 was. And obviously a lot of 2's biggest games were going were going multi-console by that stage. So a lot of those games were on the 360 as well, like Grand Theft Auto and stuff. But yeah, the PS2 is up there too. PlayStation 1 is like just so. I never had one when it first came out because they were just insanely expensive. So I had it years later, and there were so many fantastic games. But a lot of them don't. Some of them still look good, but a lot of the other early 3D ones don't. I think the PlayStation 2, that's probably even more extreme. Like games like, Vice City don't look great if you go back and play them now, and they don't necessarily handle amazing either. But there's so many, all the Metal Gear Solids that came out on PlayStation 2. Like PS2 is really fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. I'm an optimist. I think like most of the consoles I've owned, I've really enjoyed. Except for maybe the Xbox One, whatever that one.
The original
They just,
Xbox.
yeah, their whole naming scheme for the past 10 years has to be shot to the
It's
moon. It's just
so difficult to wrap my head around.
so stupid. They
Yeah.
tried to make it like iPhones and it didn't. No, everyone was, it's not going to work. Didn't work. Now they're trying to get out of it. Yeah, I don't know. Very silly. Even the 360 was a weird name, but I guess it kind of worked in the
But
end.
you can figure it out. Like the 360 is greater than the Xbox, so you could easily kind of wrap your head around that. And then after that, it just series whatever that came. Like what
Xbox One. It's like we already have an Xbox One. What are we supposed to call that now? Xbox? No, because that's what all that Xbox is just shorthand for the current one. The original. You're gonna make me call that the original Xbox? Like we just call it the Duke after that huge controller you guys made.
So then Xbox 360, I think, I'm not sure if you heard the news, there's going to be something discontinuing with it this year.
Oh, really? Like Xbox Live
the
Arcade
marketplace or something.
Right.
It's going to be. I guess you're going to shed a tear once this officially happens, right? It's the end of an era for.
I think I had NHL 94 on that, right? Wasn't there an Xbox Live Arcade version of an NHL game? I can't remember. There was of Sensible Soccer, because I was in Ireland, and when they put up the Sensible Soccer, Sensible Soccer is a different game.
That'd be an awesome game.
Yeah, you gotta pay extra for that one. It's an OnlyFans. A Sensible Software. I was like waiting for them to post it, and I downloaded it, and it got pulled 3 minutes later from the store for some reason. But I already had it, so it was like gone for a day because I don't know what they were doing. They were patching it or something. I remember years later finding somebody who worked on the team, and they were like, "Oh yeah, there was some bad shit in there we had to get out or whatever." So I had it, and like maybe me and 10 other people in the world were playing Sensible Soccer for a day, which was fun. That was a good PlayStation or a good Xbox port. But yeah, it's a shame that it's a big problem with, you know all about it, right? It's a big problem with old games is the, how do you keep this stuff alive? At least with a lot of, we figured out, ROMs, rips of CDs, ISOs, that sort of stuff. At least that way we can retain a lot of this stuff. But, online games or games of service games or any game that needs to like tap on a server for a second to see your progression, those are just going to go. Like we've already seen it happen. Like there's no way of preserving that stuff outside of the extreme version of having a user controlled server, but that's not going to have the data that was on the official server. So yeah, it's a real problem for sure.
Now, I guess one of the last questions I'm going to ask you, because we're coming up close to an hour, love to know your thoughts. What is the best controller? It's got to be the N64 controller, right? And I'm joking with that because that was for me at least, a piece of trash. Some people might like it, but I couldn't figure it out.
Best one. It might be the 360, I think, because there's a lot of like early console controllers that work really well. There's a lot of bad Mega Drive controllers, you know what I mean? Like,
well, the original was pretty solid.
The official one was really good. Yes.
Yeah.
The third party ones they used to get, remember with the turbo buttons and 58 different configurations. That stuff was dirt. But no, I'm with you. The official one was really good, and so is like the early Nintendo ones, like the SNES and the NES controllers are just like so. Like I didn't even have those as kids, and I get a little pan of nostalgia when I see the colorful buttons on the SNES one. Like that's really. Actually, here's the question: which version of NHL would you play more than anything? Do you play Genesis? Do you play Nintendo? Like, what's your
Genesis all the way? Yeah, Mega Drive. Yeah, because I growing up, we had a Genesis. We actually had both. We traded it in the Genesis for a Super Nintendo when Street Fighter came out because we wanted to play Street Fighter.
Nice.
But we had the original NHL hockey, which NHL 92, I guess, is the unofficial name for the Genesis. And then friend had NHL 93 and NHL 94 came out. So like we played those games. So I never really played the NHL on the SNES too much.
Right.
Never had exposure to it. How about you? Are you the same as me?
Yeah, it was always Genesis. Yeah, because I never had access to the other ones. And it worked. It was a good controller for that. That was the thing as well. Was they were designing those games with like single button or two button configurations. The Amiga games I played, like Sensible Soccer, only had one button. You had one button, so that means pass, shoot. How do you get to a menu screen if there's only one button? It's very strange. For that to get to the substitutions bench, you would tap left twice and it would bring you to the subs bench.
It
So
worked.
so I mean, it had a keyboard, so I think you could hit escape or whatever. But there was that was the way you got around that stuff. It was completely crazy.
Danny, I played Atari quite a bit growing up.
Right, yeah.
So one button is, and I played the Commodore 64 a ton. So one button was all we had. That was the peak. That's perfection. What did you need a second button for? It was just just fluff
gets in the way. And I think that's why the 360 was one of the ones that I liked, because there was a couple of consoles that were having trouble with the analog stick thing. The PlayStation 1 pad, PS2 controls obviously was really good, but then when largely we haven't moved that far from the 360 pad. That's kind of what a lot of stuff is now. And it's inspired by that N64 one a little bit, the placements of the analogs and stuff, so I think that one, in a way, I think it's an unpopular answer because it doesn't pull on the heartstrings as much, but I think in 50 years time that will probably be one of the ones that it's sort of codified a lot of the way we hold controllers today.
No, it's a sensible answer, just like Sensible Soccer.
Exactly.
But we're it's past an hour for.
I can take a couple more questions. I'm happy. It's a fun chat.
Okay,
Whatever
did
works.
you play the Amiga console? It was a Amiga 32, or I forget the name of it.
Oh, the 32X.
That's it. Okay.
Have I ever played it? I think I played it at a convention or something. Didn't have it. It was really expensive. It cost, I think, in my head, it cost as much as the base console did. I didn't have the 32X, and I didn't have the CD32 either, which was their other. This was them just drowning and swinging for the fences. They were just trying desperately to make that leap, and they didn't really do it. No, a lot of the games didn't appeal to me on the 32. There was I remember the Amiga had 1 megabyte of RAM, and I remember you could pay $100 or €100, or it was pounds back then, I guess, to get a second megabyte of RAM. And I always think about that when I buy a new iPhone. I see how much RAM is on them.
It's like wow, gigabytes now rather than it's just.
Oh, it's bizarre, and it's and that's why the games came on. My copy of Street Fighter 4. Here's the Amiga copy of Street Fighter 2. Which has a great box, by the way. Just a huge, big Blanca grabbing Chun-Li's leg. This came on 4 discs because you needed to be able to load up all those awesome animations. I remember with the Mortal Kombat 2 version on the Amiga, you'd often have to, if you did a fatality, you'd have to do a disc swap for them to load it. It's like a disincentive to do the fatality. It's like you down, left, right, down, and then please insert disc 3 pops up. It's very anticlimactic.
Oh man, yeah. So screw that. I'm just gonna let the timer go. You go fall on your own from blood loss.
Exactly. Yeah.
Screw that. So I guess one last question I have for you.
Sure.
I want to, and it's gonna be with respect to Noclip. What was your favorite documentary and why?
Oh man, it's like Sophie's Choice. How dare you? I
say all of them.
I hardly ever watch them, right? And then what'll happen is usually once a year, maybe a little bit more than that, I'll have a night where I go back and I watch a chunk of them. I'll spend 3 hours and I'll just especially the older ones, because I forget a lot of one of our cats has come here.
That's a cute one.
His name is Bo.
Oh.
His name is Bo. My daughter named him after a character from one of her favorite stories, but it just so happens to also be Irish for cow. Complete coincidence. And he has a cow print on
He
him.
does, have the cow pattern.
Yeah. So it works out. He's going to jump up again in a second. They're kittens. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe the one I had the most fun putting together was our retrospective on Half-Life, because that's Half-Life's kind of my favorite game ever made. And Valve wouldn't respond to any of our emails, and it was the 20th anniversary, I guess it was, of the game coming out, of Half-Life 1 coming out in 1999, so it was 2019, and we just decided to do a documentary anyway. So we interviewed people who had made expansion packs for Half-Life, like who work in the industry. Like we went to Respawn, who make like Titanfall and Apex, and we talked to Vince Zampella about making an expansion pack that never came out 20 years ago. We went to Corey Barlog, interviewed him about it, interviewed Jeff Keighley about it because he'd been there when they were launching Half-Life back in the day. And we just made like a 2-hour documentary about like the nostalgia we all have for Half-Life. And it was a big road trip where we went all over the US for it. And I was really, really happy. And then last year with our Secret Tape label, Valve reached out and they were like, it's the 25th anniversary of Half-Life 1. We want to do a documentary. And by that stage, we'd done 2 docs on Half-Life, because we also did a 2-hour documentary about Black Mesa, which is the fan-made remake of Half-Life 1. And we'd done a whole doc on that as well. So we were sort of, experts in making documentaries about Half-Life that don't involve anyone who made it. So yeah, they reached out and I was like, literally, that's not a Noclip doc, but that is probably the proudest thing I've ever worked on, because that was just a dream come true. I got to be in Valve and work in Valve for weeks on end. We interviewed almost everyone who did it. I interviewed Gabe Newell remotely on his mega yacht somewhere in Europe. He was.
How nice was that?
I wanted to go out on the boat. I wanted to go to the boat, but they have like a COVID protocol and all this stuff. And it takes forever to get on the boat. So they were like, do it remote. You won't get on the boat. Gabe works odd hours as well because he's on the boat on his own. And then Valve is obviously in the West Coast time zone in America. So it was very, very bizarre. We did a remote and then we had a guy he has an on-boat DP. So he has somebody who does all of his photography and videography, who lives on the boat. Like, it's a big boat. So that
imagine
guy
having that.
I know
you have that much money, that big a boat, and you have some guy just taking pictures 24/7. That's his job. Like you
got to do. That's how he's in so many trailers and does so many press things that like you just have to have it. So I got my hour with Gabe. His interview was great. He was very generous, and everyone was. We had loads of people who came to the studio who hadn't been back maybe since they left, and some of them probably left, burnt out, and some of them left and were friends still. And the weirdest thing was actually, this is getting a little bit off script, but the weirdest thing about it was when I was emailing all these people, some of them hadn't seen each other in like forever, and they were like, "Oh, I'm so excited to come in and see everyone," and I was like, "Well, like I'll see all of you, but like." It's not like we're going to do all the interviews in one, you know what I mean? It's going to spread out over hours. We're actually going to do as much as possible to make sure that we don't cross you over, so you're not wasting time. So I realized that was the case. So I worked with Valve's like admin team to set up a party for them. So we did like in a restaurant, we booked out a restaurant, and we did like a social event for them all as well. And everyone turned up, and like a lot of them brought their kids who were like babies when the game was made and stuff. And that was really cool because I got to like invite everyone in, and I took some photographs, and then I was like, it's not for me, it's for them. And I went home, went back to my apartment or back to my hotel room and crashed. But yeah, I love so much of what we worked on, but definitely the Half-Life stuff on Noclip and our other project. They're probably
so that's the one. If you had a chance to relive every moment, that's the one you'd probably do.
Yeah. And when I was doing it, because I was like, and I was working so hard, we had 7 weeks to do it because they contacted us like 7 weeks from the anniversary of the 25th anniversary. So I was working really long nights. I was spending a lot of time up in Seattle away from my family and all this sort of stuff. And I remember talking to my wife through the whole process. She was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm great," because like I'm trying as much as possible. Like in my young life, when cool things were going on, I wasn't appreciating them as much in the moment. You know what I mean? I wasn't like this is going to be something you think back on in 10 years time. And when the Half-Life doc was happening last year, every moment I was like, you're going to be thinking about this. This is it. This is like one of the peaks of your like creative career. Enjoy it. And I did. I really enjoyed it. It was hard work. It was tough. There were some long edits and long nights, but it was the best. I'm so happy. And the final piece was, people really love it. It's had like 4 million views. People really enjoy it. And yeah, it'd be great. I'd love to do it again. We got to have some more Half-Life anniversary. I actually think it is the 20th anniversary of Half-Life 2 this year. So who knows? Maybe in 6 years' time I'll get to do another one or something like that. We'll have to
Right.
see.
Every milestone. I hope you're able to achieve those peaks again and recognize when you do that again that this is a moment in time that makes life worth living, because these don't happen very often, but when they do, it's good that you
Exactly.
recognize them, because some people, as you mentioned, when we're younger, we don't. But as we
Totally.
grow older, with wisdom, we figure out, man, this is an interesting moment in time. But anyways, it's getting long. I want to respect your time more. Thank you for coming on. But before we sign off, I just want to hand a baton to you, just in case anybody wants to reach out to you. Where can people find you? And yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Len. It's an absolute pleasure. I think I told you before we started recording that whenever we work on one of these projects, we sort of wade into the waters of a community that already exists. You know, we're not experts on any of the games we do our documentaries on, so we have to sort of like, the first thing I do is go and find Reddits, subreddits, go find podcasts, go find community groups, watch any documentaries that have already been done within the community, because we want to make sure that we don't sort of repeat the past, and also that we respect the games as much as we can. So yeah, my only apology is for the terrible skating in the video, but you know, I figured that was impossible to get away from anyway. Shout out to Snoopy's Home Ice, by the way, in Santa Rosa. That is the place where we filmed all of our ice skating stuff, and they were very cool. They let us book out the whole place at like 6 o'clock in the morning, I think it was. But yeah, if people want to find our stuff, it's youtube.com /@NoclipDoc. So if you just type Noclip into the internet, you will find us. We have a weekly podcast as well, the Noclip Crewcast. We have an archive channel as well, a separate YouTube channel that we upload archived VHS tapes that we're making on. We have a huge container full of game history that we're preserving at the moment in 1080p, or as good as the format will allow us to. Yeah, and we have our Patreon, of course, as well, patreon.com/noclip, but we don't put any of the docs behind paywalls. We just have extra stuff like, you know, extended interviews. We do a patron show, bonus scenes, stuff like that. Yeah, that's it. You can find me on the internet, Danny O'Dwyer. There's not many Danny O'Dwyers, so if you see one with gray hair, you've hit the right guy. Exactly.
Well, Danny O'Dwyer from Noclip, thanks for coming on. This has been a pleasure, and we'll be back at this soon. So keep your controller plugged in and your stick on the ice.